Subscribe to this podcast to get exclusive access to the after show Shooting the Breeze.
Hello and welcome to the Cool Explorations podcast. Today we're going to have on author Fran Tabor, and she is going to be speaking about her book, Live Abundantly, 50 Business Lessons from the Bible, as well as just telling us how we should be running businesses in a Christian manner and what success looks like from a Christian standpoint, as it's very different from the worldview. Hello everyone, welcome to Cool Explorations. I'm your host, Tony Peters. Today we have author Fran Tabor or Tabor?
Tabor.
Do you want to start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you currently do?
I feel like an ordinary person because I think everybody feels that way, but I was born in 1948 in a small town in Bonners-Ferry, Idaho. I was born to teenage parents, and I'm very lucky that they stayed devoted to each other their entire lives and were an awesome model for us for kids. I wish that my life would have been that storybook perfect. It wasn't, but with God's help, I think I've still had a good life and a happy life. In 1977, I and my former husband started a small business in Kalispell, Montana. Up until a few years ago, Montana was in the bottom 3% income-wise, and that part of Montana was in the bottom 25% income-wise for the state of Montana. Probably not the smartest place to start a business, but it's where we started. We were in a building that had been used for working on trucks. One truck bay we used for our living quarters. We added hot water to the building so we could take showers. Our retail space was about 600 square feet. The other truck bay was used for parts and supplies for the business, and we had a small section that was used for repair. Fast forward a few years, and I'm now in a 9,000 square foot building, takes up a quarter city block. I bought the adjacent parking lot to go with it to have more parking. I have a separate home. Both my girls have graduated from college, and one step at a time. Life has been good, but it hasn't been good like this, going straight up. It's been more like doom, 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 doom. Go, get ahead a little, drop down, get ahead a little, drop down. And most of our growth has been bootstrapped, and we have let the profit of the business bring it forward to the next step. One of the advantages to my business, one reason it's lasted so long, is that we started on a shoestring. That first year, we had $2,000 to help us through our first year expenses, buy inventory, get advertising, and even in the 1970s, 2,000 wasn't that much. We lived very inexpensively. In fact, I was extremely lucky to be in a home business combination. And I still think that is the very best lifestyle because you close the door to your business and you're at home. If in the evening you want to work on books or something, you can do that. All small businesses only have so much time and energy. And if you have to spruce up the outside of your business or the outside of your home, sometimes the home will be neglected because the business brings your income. When it's the same building, you're there. And you don't have neglected children when you have a home business. And a lot of times they're roped into helping whether they want to or not. So they have an idea that money isn't just there from the parents. It is worked for and earned.
Yeah.
And communities with a lot of home businesses have way less crime, and partly because you never have a time of day where there's nobody there. At night in the business district, if there's nobody there, thieves think, this is when we can break into a place. A lot of communities, there's almost nobody there during working hours. Thieves will rob houses. Home businesses, they don't have the opportunity. So I felt very lucky that we started our business as a traditional home business, and it helped the family life a lot. My book, Business Lessons from the Bible, has a lot of good advice, and a lot of it I know is good because a lot of it I did not follow. I broke a lot of the rules, and it was not a good experience. And it was after I straightened out my act that things got better again. So I like to say it was scientifically tested that doing things wrong resulted in bad results.
That's
Doing
what we
things
learn
right.
from. Yeah, we learn from our mistakes, exactly. And being able to
Yes,
learn
we
from those
do.
mistakes is important in life. Because
Yes, it is.
if you're not, if you don't have an open mind and willing to take correction or learn from that, then God's probably going to bring you to a point where you're going to be willing to do that.
Right. And strangely enough, that was part of one of the advantages of starting out with almost no money is if we made a mistake in how we had selected our advertising or a mistake in the products we ordered, we felt the pain immediately. People that think, oh, I could make a go of this business because look at all the financial resources I have, they can make lots of mistakes and they're padded or buffered from those mistakes. They don't suffer from the pain of them. And if you're smart at all, one of the things that we humans are really good at is rationalization. And rationalizing can kill a business. It can destroy a marriage. It is not good. And that's when, instead of saying, this was wrong, or I did this wrong, you come up with excuses to give yourself and rationalize, oh, I didn't really make the mistake. This is what was really happening. And we humans are so good at lying it to ourselves.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
And so it's good to be able to suffer from your mistakes as quickly as possible. That does tend to help minimize them. The business I have started out as just a repair business, a very small little vacuum shop repair business. And people said, well, you don't need that whole building for that. We did. They said, well, you're not going to be able to make a go of it. We did. And we went from vacuum repair to selling used vacuums, to selling new and used, to selling cleaning supplies. At one point, I hired an employee that knew a lot about sewing machines. So we went into sewing machine repair and sergers and selling sewing machines. And now in that 9,000 square foot building, we have a huge area of cleaning supplies, a whole corner of vacuums with a fancy rug to demonstrate on, 4,000 bolts of fabric, and one sewing machine that sells for $20,000. Which if you had told me 5 years ago that there'd be home sewing machines that could sell for that kind of money, I'd have just laughed at you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They have them, and people buy them.
Wow.
So we've come a long way from $2,000 and celebrating having hot water.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that comes from learning and experience.
It comes from learning, experience, a lot of mistakes along the way. And probably the most important thing to learn is when you make a mistake, try really hard to be honest with yourself about it, pick yourself up and start again.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was not the first business I started. That we had started about 4 or 5 businesses before that, before we had the one that succeeded. And there again, that has to go with you keep trying.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little about your testimony and how God has kind of worked through your life to bring you to the point where you're at right now?
I was raised in a good home with good parents. We moved a lot. My parents always tried to find a good church home everywhere we lived. One of the things I did not notice as a child, because as a child, you just assume whatever's going on in your world is your world. But my parents' marriage was always more strained in each new place until they found a church home. And then at least once a week, they'd be with like-minded people. They would concentrate on what was important in their lives, and their relationship became more relaxed to the point where they stayed together for over 50 years. I mean, it's just a marvelous testimony.
Yeah, nowadays
And I'd been raised in a church home. Oh, when I got married, I fell for this thing that God could be worshipped anywhere, which is true. And as long as two or more of you together, that makes a difference. That's true. You need your time alone. That's true. We would work hard during the week, and then Sundays, instead of going to church, we would sleep in because we deserve the sleep. And we never found, or correction, we never looked for a church home. We never attended any church regularly. When we had visit relatives that attended church, we'd go with them, but we did not go out of our way to give any type of religious instruction to our children, which was a tremendous mistake. And we ourselves did not have that one day a week respite from just the daily stresses of everyday life, where you thought about something more important than yourself and your own little world, where you thought about what is important to God in eternity. And I know for a fact that is one of the things that led to our divorce. There are a lot of other factors, but that made us weaker for those and more vulnerable to those other factors. It doesn't mean going to church is a guarantee you're going to stay together, but it does help with the odds in your favor. And not doing so definitely puts the odds against you. After I've been divorced for a couple of years, I did find a church home that I really, really liked. Started attending on a weekly basis. And I started officially tithing. I really couldn't afford to tithe at that point in time. I had just gone through a whole series of disasters that I had uninsured cancer. Before the cancer was diagnosed, I had been sleeping all the time, not taking care of my business, just letting things slide. I had a cot in my office because I had gone from a 15-minute power nap in the afternoon to a 2-hour nap in the afternoon to a 2-hour nap in the morning. I was asleep at the wheel. I had 2 employees who were embezzling big time. I had several employees that were doing little thefts that they probably didn't think were really thefts, just a bottle of this. But the 2 that were embezzling big time were a major problem. After my operation, I slowly got better, and I got really looking at the books, and I realized how much money I owed, all the money that had come in the previous year. Instead of having a profit, because I'd always managed my money very cautiously, I owed a huge amount of money. And this is before I started attending church regularly. And pride is a very expensive item. You want to be proud of your accomplishments. The Bible says even a child knows if he's done good or bad. But there's a difference between feeling self-respect from an accomplishment and the kind of pride that lets you hurt yourself. At the beginning of 2008, when I realized how deep my debt was, I could, at that point of time, gone to my banker and said, hey, I own this building. This is my debt. These are the mistakes I made. I'm back at force now. I need to refinance my building to pay all this off. I didn't, because I would have had to, in the process, tell my banker that, hey, I was really stupid. I don't care what the excuses are. I let 2 people get away with embezzling a huge amount of money from me. I was just really ashamed of myself that I had actually done that. And also, the bank loan would have been like 5 or 6% at that point. And I had all kinds of credit cards with a huge amount of credit. I could have bought a house with the amount of credit I had on those credit cards. And they were all 1 or 2% interest. The highest one was 3%. 3% interest versus over 5%, maybe even 6%. No brainer. And if I put it on the credit cards, nobody would know how stupid I was. I could keep it my little secret. So I paid off this debt with my credit cards. And then I got the first statement. And that card went from 2% to 15%. The next card went from 3% to 27%. I called them up and I said, you have never had a late payment from me. You have never had an underpayment. What is going on here? And they all said the same thing. Well, if you read your fine print, you would know that if for any reason your credit rating went down, your interest rate would go up. You have maxed out all your cards. Therefore, your credit is now.
Yeah, it affects your credit rating. Yeah, it does.
I didn't know that. All of a sudden, like my lowest interest rate card was over 15%, and most of them were in the 20s. I could only afford to pay minimum payments. A few pennies went to principal. Everything else went to this interest. So then, hat in hand, I went humbly to the bank. Now, in 2008, a lot of banking laws were changed. A lot of it was brought on by the housing crisis, and the problems were caused by the big banks. Well, the big banks are also the ones who can afford lobbyists. And so they passed all these laws to prevent people over lending on undervalued property. What they really did was make life really hard for the small independent banks. Because at that point in time, with every survey they did, like 90% of the people were thrilled with their small independent bank. Those doing businesses with the big national banks were less happy. They just did not get the service. They felt like they were less honest. But with the rewritten laws to protect us from another recession like hit in 2008, the little banks now had their hands tied, and the big banks didn't have that much going different. And my banker looked at me and said, Fran, I have done business with you for over 20 years. If you would have come to me 1 month ago, we could have rewritten this and you would have had your money. As it is, his hands were tied. He could not lend it to me. And he said that, and if he tried to push it through, he would have the feds down on him going over all of his books of the fine tooth comb. And he said it just was not worth the headache. He was having enough trouble. He could not afford to have two people have their full time devoted to dealing with the federal government.
Yeah, my wife actually works at a federal bank, and she's like, today all the interest rates jumped up by 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but she said 1%, she said, has now made it so that people now with more mortgages, a lot of them won't be able to afford their mortgages,
right?
Due to that 1%. And that is at a time already they're trying to counteract the overspending that they've done in their time. So they're trying to counteract that, and they're trying to hit this all the inflation that's been going on. They're trying to hit that, but by raising it by 1%, they're already hurting people who are already hurting. So now it's worse for all these businesses and people as of today because of this 1% increase. It's going to hit people hard that are already suffering due to trying to rebound after COVID and all the stuff that went on there, and with the high gas prices. So the price of everything has gone up. Our groceries that we normally would spend $100 on, we're spending $200 and some dollars on. Now you're going to add 1% on top of that. Yeah, it is going to hurt people.
Yeah, because it's not just the 1%. That 1% gets added to other things, so it ends up being a compounded 1%. And as it goes through the economy, that gets compounded. And some of the people with real money are going to find themselves in a better position. But that would be implying things about those people with real money, so we won't go there. But for the next 3 years, I ate oatmeal 3 times a day. That I was advised that I should declare bankruptcy, but if I did that, it would really hurt the business, because you're in a retail business, your reputation is important, and that would hurt that. And also, I didn't want to hurt the people that had trusted me to like lend the money for my inventory, because I didn't borrow money directly as such, but I planned with my majority of my suppliers as on 30-day and 60-day accounts. It's a standard operating procedure. And they trusted me for those 30-day accounts, and some of them ended up being paid in 90 and 120 days, but they all got paid. My 2007, I had 27 employees. 2008, things really slowed down. I had 8 employees and I had trouble keeping them busy all the time, every day, which was just I go into 2008 with more debt than I'd ever had in my life under horrible financial terms. And it was like a spigot was turned off on our finances in our town. That in 2007, if I had to go someplace at noon, I just felt terrible about it, because I'd wait at a stoplight and have to wait for 3 or 4 red lights before I could get through the traffic. There'd be so many people doing things. 2008 in March, if I had to go someplace at noon, there was no other traffic on the road. It was like driving at midnight. The streets were empty. There was just so little economic activity happening. So there I was in the worst financial situation I'd ever been in my life, the lowest income I had ever had in my life, eating oatmeal 3 times a day. Although there is one funny thing, is that my business was still doing better than average. I still knew sales better than average for selling other people's products. And so when I would have suppliers come to town, they would take me out to fancy restaurants to wine and dine me, because they had not a clue what I was actually living. So either I was having filet mignon that somebody else was buying for me, and I'm going, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll think about increasing my order. Or I was home eating oatmeal. And those suppliers had no clue how bad it was for me. So it was kind of funny.
So what inspired you to write your book? Like, how did that inspiration come about?
Well, I did the first draft back when I was feeling all smug that I knew this. But then the second draft was written during this time period, because I started attending a church, like I said, and I started tithing, which I was slow to start doing, but I did eventually. And a funny thing happened. The moment I wrote that check to tithe and I paid it, the way I looked at myself changed. I stopped seeing myself as trapped by all this debt, which said I was making minimum payments, I was getting things paid down, but I saw myself as rich enough to give away this much money. And when you see yourself as rich enough to give, you see yourself as rich. And then you see yourself, okay, I'm a worthwhile person. I can give things away. And that changed my attitude. And that day I got really looking around, and every store I went to, everybody was just miserable, sad. I mean, it's called an economic depression for a reason. It's not just your money allowance is down, but people are depressed during a depression. There is a difference between a recession and a true depression. Like the early 1930s was a depression. You read the accounts of that time, and I remember talking to people who lived through that time, and people were depressed. And I went into my shop and I thought, we don't want to be like this. And so I immediately announced to my employees, we are going to be an oasis of happiness. I made sure everything that was on display, the bright colors, were front and center. I made sure everybody laughed about something. I made sure that it wasn't just token, but any customer that came in the door was going to be their chance to make sure they had a good paycheck. Greet them with all the happiness you can imagine. And we became an oasis of happiness. And then I went back to this book that I had written years earlier when I was feeling all smug and successful. And I rewrote it from the viewpoint of somebody who had been up here, collapsed down here, and I could blame others, but the reality is that intellectually, I knew the most important aspect of the business when you're a small privately owned business is you yourself. And I had neglected me. I had not gone to regular checkups. When I started sleeping more than I was awake, when I started sleeping 15, 18 hours a day, you add up your night sleep and your morning nap and your afternoon nap, that should have been a clue Hey, doctor, how come I am suddenly needing so much more sleep? That cancer should have been diagnosed 4 years sooner.
Yeah.
It wasn't because I had neglected me. The people that stole from me, I gave them the opportunity. You know, it's one thing to say, well, people should have self control. The truth of the matter is, everybody has a weakness for something. Like when I was a kid, one of my aunts had married a man who was an alcoholic. Whenever he was going to come to visit, my mother would take anything alcoholic in the house and hide it under the kitchen sink behind the cleaning supplies because she knew he would never touch cleaning supplies. And she explained it to me that we knew he had a weakness, and most of the time he had it under control. But if he saw something easy to grab, if he was in a moment of weakness, he was one of these type of alcoholics. If he had a little tiny drink, within a week, he'd be on a complete bender.
And that's why with the Bible, it doesn't say we shouldn't drink, but it becomes a sin when you lead other people into that kind of temptation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he said, each one of us has our own weakness, our own temptation. I know for a fact if somebody sees $1 million going through an account, there's a thing saying, well, she's not going to miss an extra $1,000. That's only less than 1% of it. That $1,000 was a paycheck. It was a payment to a supplier. It was a payment to Uncle Sam, those 941s. And yeah, there wasn't really that much extra, but I made it by sleeping all the time for people whose weakness was money. I made it easy for them to succumb to their weakness. I could blame themselves all day long, but I know for a fact that that is one of the most common weaknesses for everybody. It is a kindness to them to help prevent that as much as possible, just like we hid the alcohol from my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very hard for me, was to take self-responsibility for my mistakes and my errors. Like I said, rationalization. It is really easy to rationalize. Well, it was bad enough. I had to wipe out my savings 100% to pay for cancer. But I had the savings. I was prepared. I had taken a risk. I had taken the risk eyes wide open. I should have also had things in place. Like I said, that should have been discovered years sooner and been cheaper. And those people wouldn't have had a chance to succumb to temptation themselves. I failed my employees, and I failed my customers, and I failed my suppliers. I had to look in the mirror and say it was me. Yes, I had to look in the mirror and say, God, forgive me for not taking seriously one day a week for you, and not taking seriously that everything I have is yours. So tithing to you is really fulfilling an IOU. It's not giving up my money. It's sharing what you already gave me.
Yeah, it's God's money.
And so I rewrote my book from a little bit of a humble standpoint, but also with the determination that this was not going to be preachy. It was not going to be depressing. I wanted it to be fun. I wanted it to be filled with laughter. I wanted it to be joyous. And I wanted it to be entertaining. Because if it's not entertaining, nobody's going to read it. And I hope you found it entertaining.
I did. That's why I'm doing a devotional series on it. So people can keep tuning in. We'll keep those coming.
Good.
Where can people find your book online?
Well, it is available through Amazon. I am planning on also reissuing it through Drafty Digital, which will give it through some other places. The reason I'm going to I'm going to keep it on Amazon because that's the gorilla in the room, but it's no longer going to be exclusive. In fact, I took it off exclusive some time ago. And before the end of the year, it should be available as an audiobook. I have another book done audio, and it was a reasonably pleasant experience. But the reason it's no longer going to be exclusive is that when it came out in the 2014 version, It did well enough that in its category, it was a Kindle top 10. And whenever sales would start dwindling, I'd advertise on Amazon again and I'd sell a few books. And then about 2 years ago, that's almost 3 years ago now, I tried to do an advertising campaign and it kept saying, this does not meet our standards. I finally got someone to explain to me why they weren't meeting the standards. They said, oh, well, the title of your book could be offensive to some readers. And because it could be offensive, we're not going to have you allow any of your Amazon paid for advertising.
Yeah, of course.
And the title of the book is Live Abundantly, 50 Business Lessons from the Bible. And I go, okay. So that's when I started looking for other ways to market. And I've been kind of slow at doing that because I've been busy. But before the end of the year, I'll have it in other places as well as Amazon. But you just about have to have things on Amazon. They are the gorilla in the room.
Yeah, they are. They're the big seller. Yeah.
But
So how as Christians do you, just from your book, how should we be handling our money, both in a business standpoint and as a personal standpoint? And I know they kind of intertwine.
well, I have a whole two whole chapters on specifically money handling. One of them is called Money and Shovels. Money is not an end to itself. Money is a tool. And I compared money to a shovel that you can have a shovel. It's a tool. And somebody can give you a brand new shiny shovel. You can put it up in an attic and look at it every so often and say, oh, that's a perfect shovel. Or you can use it once, leave it out in the yard. The rain hits it. It gets all rusty. The handle rots. So you've used it once and it's worthless. Or somebody can use that shovel, have a garden, sell the produce of the garden, take care of the shovel, put it away, put linseed oil on the handle once in a while, and 10 years later still have a perfectly functional shovel acting almost as good as new, and all of this 10 years of productivity. Money is like that. You can hoard your money. That's like that shovel up in the attic. It doesn't do anybody any good. It's just hoarded and it's building up. And it's just there. Or you can take and go out and go, wee, we're having a party. And the next day, you're just as broke as ever. That's like what happens to people who win the lottery. They think, wow, I got all this money. I have so much money, I'll never be broke again. And a few weeks later, or a few years later, over half of the lottery winners are bankrupt.
And they're miserable.
Or you could be like, every so often you'll read about somebody who was on minimum wage their whole life, died, and left millions of dollars to their family, loved ones, favorite charities. And they go, wow, how could that person have done that when we know they never made more than minimum wage? They lived within their means and their little bit left over. They saved, they invested. Like when they bought stock, when you're buying stock, you're lending money to a business so that business can develop it. They helped others grow and do better, and that came back to them. And they were like the people that used the shovel to create a garden and took care of the shovel. Money is a tool. And if you use money wisely, it will normally grow and come back to you. And if you have something happens that it gets all wiped out, because that can happen to anybody. I love the stories of Job and of Joseph in the Bible, because they both show people who have lost everything through no fault of their own, but maintained their faith. And then when they had a chance to do better, they took all that knowledge from when they had nothing to grow more. For instance, in the book of Job, when I learned about Job in Sunday school, I had the impression that after Job did all of his suffering, God goes, okay, Job, you're rich again. It wasn't that simple. God told off his friends who all his many pages have been sitting and giving Job advice after advice after advice. And I've always had the impression that Job's final suffering wasn't the boils on his skin. It was listening to his friends who had never done as well as he did, sitting there and telling him what he should have done differently with his life and why he should have done it differently to his life. That had to have been as much a punishment as the boils.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I hate it when people say, well, you were really stupid when you did that, especially when they're right. None of us like hearing somebody go on and on and on and on. But what God did is tell his friends, okay, you are to give Job some gold so he can reinvest it. And Job took the money that his friends now actually to me, is like the original, put your money where your mouth is type speech. His friends then lent Job the money. Job reinvested it, grew his wealth the old-fashioned way, one step at a time, just like he had his next dozen kids, one kid at a time. They weren't all just dropped on his lap all at once. And he became wealthier than before. And one of the reasons he became wealthier than before is he had gone through a lot, learned a lot, and was wiser than the first time around. That I'm sure that when he built up his first fortune, he made mistakes, and now he knew more about how to effectively raise herds and how to manage servants, and he was a smarter and wiser man.
And he followed God.
He followed God.
He trusted God and remained faithful the
time.
entire
Trusted God and followed God, but it was not done all at once. It wasn't a snap. Okay, Job, you're rich again. It was one step at a time, and his friends lent him the money to get started again. So he did need help, and it is an example of the friends using that money as an investment.
Exactly.
Because Job, I'm sure, paid them back, probably with interest, a small amount, because we didn't, too much would have been like theft, but a small amount was rental on the money, and it made a difference. The other chapter I had was the Pinocchio Effect, and if you borrow too much money, you become slave to the lender, and you become a puppet to the person supplying the money. And we see that a lot when people, it doesn't even have to be borrowed, that we oftentimes see somebody with a very high-ranking, high-paying job, either government or private industry, or maybe they're a movie star, and we see them publicly state taking a position with which they disagree in private, but they are a slave to that income. And so they are somebody else's puppet because they're a slave to the greed of that income. They cannot conceive of being without it, and they have no faith that they could earn money otherwise. It takes a lot of faith to walk away from a high income. And if you, like a lot of businesses get started borrowing money from friends or relatives. To a small extent, this can be good. This is family helping family. But if you're going into a specialty business that you know extremely well, and the person lending the money knows nothing about your specialty business, but because he has a lot of money, he's assuming that he is rich. Because he is rich, he knows more. He'll start giving you advice. And if you don't follow the advice, you have to pay back that money all at once. And if you do follow the advice, you know it's going to be bad for your specialty business. But you took the money, you took a lot of it, you are a slave to the lender.
So true.
And if you do something on your own, that is a bad thing. You're more apt to learn from it. You're more apt to learn what made it bad, as opposed to, gee, I shouldn't have listened to him. And if you are financially independent, then you're free to listen to anybody, learn as much as you can from them, and then on your own, decide what you're going to do. So Money can enslave you in so many ways, but money is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or ill. And like any tool, if it is not used, it is wasted.
Yeah. And that kind of ties into success, and how we view success. So most people view success as a money thing. Like, you're successful because you made a lot of money. But that isn't really how we as Christians are called to view success. How are we as Christians called to view success?
That is actually a much more complicated question than most people think, because it's so easy to say, well, as long as I know I have love in my heart, I have the love of God in my heart, I know I'm a successful Christian because I know I've been forgiven. And that's like the beginning of success.
It's a surface level. Yeah.
And like the book of Timothy is advised, if you want to encourage people to be aware of Christianity, don't grab them by the shirt collar and shout at them, you gotta be saved right now. And don't be miserable going, oh, the world is a horrible place. No, be so joyous that people want to come to you and say, what is the secret of your joy in life? And then say, because I have the joy of the Lord. But the reason I say that's the beginning and not the answer. To whom much is given, much is expected. And as Christians, we have been granted the gift of eternal life through the sacrifice of our Lord. I cannot think of how much more anybody could be given. To be a successful Christian, we have to continuously ask ourselves, what else could be expected of me? How else can I serve? You have written books that people can enjoy, like your graffiti book. People can be opened up to places to see beauty that otherwise they may not have seen beauty. You become aware of a part of the culture they otherwise not have been aware of. That is giving back. And your book, Helping You Getting Through Depression, is giving back. I gave back with my business lessons from the Bible book, and also my little booklet about how to compete with Walmart, and also some books that are just strictly for pure entertainment. That is giving back. Other people give back with music. Some people give back by, this may sound trivial, but keeping up their home, making their lawn beautiful, so somebody walking down their street would feel more positive and optimistic about life. That is giving back. Another person going for a walk, having their trash bag with them and picking up garbage so that the people can feel better about the community, that is giving back. A successful Christian knows that there is going to be times when life is totally unfair, knows that there's going to be times when he feels absolutely miserable. We are never once given a guarantee of a perfect life. We are never told that because we're going to be Christians, bad things are not going to happen. Like the Bible says, it rains alike on the godly and the ungodly. And sometimes the rain is wanted, and sometimes it's just a little bit too much rain. The godly and the ungodly are going to experience both. But as a Christian, we have the opportunity to say, there is an eternal plan. I don't know what it is, but I have faith that I keep picking myself up and trying, that somehow, as long as I keep making my little corner of the world better, I am somehow going to be helping God's plan. I don't know what it is. And like for that person picking up the trash, and I take my kids to the playground. And we always have the bags, and I would make a point to say, kids, if you find any broken glass, help me pick it up. For all I know, maybe that picking up that broken glass kept some other kid from running and cutting open his knee. I don't know. I'd like to think it did, because it's fun to pat yourself on the back. but it was something that back then I could do. But a Christian is successful when he is always open to the fact that there is something he can do to make the world a little bit better for everybody else. He is never successful when he thinks, wow, I have succeeded at this. My job is done. I've succeeded at this is good. My job is done.
Yeah, I love the parable of that Jesus tells of the rich man and his servants and what they did with the money and how they were judged according to what they did on the money. Because I think that's such an important principle for us to learn, that
Yes.
it was not just an example of money, which is the surface level stuff that people see with that parable. It's speaking of so much more. It's what we're given in life, both in spiritually and physically, and what we do with that and how we glorify God and honor God through that. That's kind of the not so surface level of that parable. And it really just shows how we need to be living our lives in that way that honors God and honoring what he's given us, giving it back to God because it is his, and giving back to the community because he's given us the Holy Spirit, and we need to share that Holy Spirit with the world. And I think that ties in exactly what you're saying about success. That is just giving back and helping our community and the world with the grace and the love and the glory that we've been given through God. And everything should be for his glory.
And it's very important to remember that God does not see any of us as victims. He sees us as victors.
Yeah, exactly.
Like in 2008, when the recession hit and my income plummeted and my debt rose, I had the choice of saying, oh, woe is me, which I had minutes of that. But the choice was to be saying, I am struggling to get through it. I respect the fact that, and I want others to respect the fact that I am struggling and getting through it. I do not want other people to pity me for having the struggle. Because every life out there, no matter how blessed it looks, has its own struggle. We do not know what it is, but it has it. And every one of us has a choice. Do I want to be pitied, or do I want to be respected for the struggle? And as Christians, we are continuously struggling against our sin nature. We are continuously struggling with wanting the easy way out. And as Christians, we are respected for the struggle.
Yeah, and God expects us to turn to him for help and advice and guidance. And when we do, that's when we've come to the point that God's like, I think you're catching on to what I was trying to teach you here.
And some of us, it takes more than once.
Oh yes. Some of us are very stubborn. Speaking from experience, they're very stubborn.
A lot of personal experience here.
Well, what advice would you have to give to a Christian entrepreneur who's just kind of getting started? This could be myself, I guess this question could be for, but any Christian entrepreneur out there who's looking at getting started for trying to make money for themselves, but run a business that God's going to be happy with.
First step would be honest with yourself with why you are starting your own business and not working for somebody else, because there is honor in both roles. I personally think that's an advantage for whatever type of business you want to go into. If you have the opportunity to work for somebody else first, that is good. Then if you go out on your own, it's only polite to not be in competition with the person who taught you. That is something that a lot of people forget. Like they'll open the same type of business down the corner when they could just as easily gone to the other side of town, or maybe even another town. and they should be honest with the person that they learned from and say, thank you for teaching me. Because if you take even knowledge from somebody without acknowledging it, that's a form of theft.
Mm-hmm.
So learn as much as you can from others, but do so in an honorable, open, and honest way. And then be willing to uh, you do not want to do this fake it till you make it thing. To be honest, nobody's going to be more impressed with your business because you drive a brand new car. You want to invest in your business. You want to invest in yourself. You want to take care of yourself and your business, whatever it is. And don't borrow money to make yourself look more successful than you are. Like one of the pieces of financial advice I give people is if you have to go in debt to buy something, like you do need a car for transportation, or you think you need a newer car, but your old one is still working. Figure out what the payment is, like if it's going to be on a 1-year payment, go anywhere from 1 to 4 months, putting that same amount of money in your savings account. The first month that you could not make that payment or did not want to make that payment be the month that that new purchase could have sunk your business. So you be very, very careful of debt. The other thing is, like, think of a shepherd. He could have roast lamb for dinner, or he could let that lamb grow up and for a good many years have the wool from that lamb. It's been a sheep for a good many years to make money. And so he's eating like a vegetarian that first few years because he's helping his flock to grow. Your business should be a reinvestment in yourself. You'd want to take as little off the top at the beginning as you can. And never forget to be giving as you go along. Because if you see yourself as rich enough to give, then you'll see yourself rich enough for the moment. And it's going to make you feel more positive about your accomplishments. And always be willing to help another do more. And always help another. Like, I'm a member of a trade organization for my business, and we have online sites, and I'm always giving advice about how to fix things or how to sell something more effectively. I've written many articles for our trade magazine about different little tidbits for running a vacuum shop or cleaning supply shop, helping other people in my profession do better. And until you can help somebody else do better, you have not done well enough yourself. Always find ways to help other people do better in their profession. And always say thank you for whatever happened that day. Even if it was an absolutely bad day, the bad times teach us more than the good times. Teaching people to sell, one of the worst things that can happen when you try to teach a new employee to sell is if the first person they deal with, they sell a top of the line item and everything goes textbook perfect in the sale and they go, wow, I'm great. They don't know why they sold it. On the other hand, if they don't sell for 2 or 3 times, or they have to have somebody else come in and help them finish selling it, it is always more obvious why you did not sell something. The failures teach us more than the successes. And so at the end of a really bad day, it's really hard to do this, but say, thank you, God, for the lessons you want me to learn from this day. Because if you have an attitude of gratitude, it really will help your attitude or altitude. That's from Zig Ziglar. Zig Ziglar had a lot of cute little couplets. And so far, I've agreed with every one I've read. But your attitude will determine your altitude, and your attitude of gratitude will maximize your altitude. It's just one of his favorites.
Yeah, that's
And
great
it is
advice.
absolutely true.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on. I've really, really appreciated it. It's been a good talk. Some great advice. So thank you again for coming on, and we'll keep doing devotions on your book,
Thank you.
and get your little nuggets of information out there.
And I'm going to do a real quick plug for my other book. Let's see if I can have it. It shows just as a secret how to compete against Walmart and the internet. And it has a lot of the same advice that's in my business lessons from the Bible book. Only it only has 13 lessons, not 50.
So a little shorter.
Yes, and that's the one that's available on an audiobook.
Thank you for listening to Cool Explorations. You've just heard from author Fran Tabor about her book Live Abundantly, 50 Business Lessons from the Bible, as she tells us about how to live a successful life from a Christian standpoint and run businesses that way, as it's very different from running a Christian business and the success that society tells us we should have. Well, I have just been blessed with so many people who are requesting to be on the show, and I'm impressed with how many people want to share their testimonies or what they're doing for the Lord right now. If I haven't got back to you, I promise I will get back to you. I look forward to speaking with each of you and interviewing you, and keep tuning into the show. There's lots of new people that are coming on here, and if you're considering wanting to come on the show, just shoot me an email at tpeters745@gmail.com, and I will get back to you.